it's a good start on a new relationship. I saw President Trump said really kind things when he just tweeted out, so that's good. I think everyone's feeling relatively good on the meeting yesterday.
We were all grateful that the meeting went the way that it did, knowing how some other meetings have gone in that exact same office with other world leaders. So there was appreciation for that.
Just look at the video that came out the next day. I don't know that I've seen the White House produce a video like that after meeting with another world leader.
The expectations were not very high. Don't shame us in front of the president. Stand your ground. I believe he did that.
Premiers there, emerging from a noon-hour debrief from the Prime Minister following his face-to-face meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. You also heard from the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet. The tone in that meeting was certainly more respectful than other meetings Donald Trump has held in the Oval Office. But the key question, will that lead to any substantial changes in the trade war or the relationship more largely between our two countries? Let's talk about that with our front bench. With me this evening, Sharon Carr is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. She's now a partner at Sovereign Advisory. Jamie Ellerton is a conservative strategist and the founder and principal of Canaptus. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Belanger is with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies, and sitting next to him, that's Hannah Thibodeau. She's a former news anchor, now an executive communications officer at Global Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Hi. Very nice to see you. Hannah, your impression. I mean, we were all focused on the meeting and whether or not the Prime Minister was going to get Zelensky. He didn't. He didn't, and nothing even close to it. There were some memorable moments out of it. For you, though, what are you watching for now that the meeting is done and set for?
I think, you know, you heard all the reaction from the premiers and the official opposition leader. Nobody could say anything bad out of that meeting. He succeeded. The biggest success is that the conversation is now happening. And that is something that maybe Prime Minister Trudeau and his team, as you could hear from even Donald Trump yesterday, that wasn't going to continue under that administration. We see that Donald Trump does have respect for Prime Minister Carney. You know, he goes, he makes some fun, has some funny moments down there, but does manage the president in a way that he will be able to continue to have those conversations with him. So that's the biggest thing. He's opened the door to be able to pick up that phone and talk to the president. So what happens next? More conversations. He is coming here for the G7. That's a big thing. We didn't know that up until then. He will be here for that. We have conversations saying that CUSMA is actually a good deal. All of these things are positive now, that he can work towards a more concrete things down the road. And that potentially wasn't going to happen under the former Prime Minister. So big win for him yesterday. And you even heard it from all the opposition parties and saw it in that video put out by the White House later.
Yeah. Even premiers who are sometimes skeptical, yes, like Premier Smith, for example, of the federal Liberal government, were saying, hey, this could be a reset. And I think all of that is very valid, Carl. I wonder, though, like, what is the objective for Canada? Is it to sign a new USMCA that, you know, Donald Trump will then contravene 400 times like he has over the last 2 months? Like how do you figure out what you want out of these so-called negotiations?
It's difficult because you don't really know what Donald Trump wants out of this, right?
Like, he wasn't clear yesterday.
He wasn't clear. He brought back up the 51st state, and, you know, there was this exchange on that. So it's difficult. But the key thing is that Mark Carney needs to make sure that Canada is not, Canada's economy is not hurt too much by what's happening right now. So basically, you want to gain time. You want to be able to buy time in order to try to get to the point where we're able to negotiate a deal and all those tariffs are lifted. And so, in a way, the way he approached it was telling, because he didn't want to confront President Trump. As much as he held his ground, he went in talking about, you know, his great leadership. And he always was a transformative presidency under Donald Trump and all these things. Donald Trump liked that. And that's all this is about. It's about, you know, how Donald Trump feels. And I can't predict how he will feel next week. But after the meeting yesterday, he felt good, and so did most Canadians.
Jamie, what are your thoughts on sort of how it went and what you're looking for moving forward?
Yeah, forget any other Canadian precedents. I don't think I've seen any other leader sit in that Oval Office chair and look as relaxed and confident in managing the moment as we saw with Prime Minister Carney. I thought he did the country incredibly proud. I really think it's probably too soon to judge as to what comes next after this. Clearly, the relationship had broken down with the previous Prime Minister, and Donald Trump kind of had it out for Canada. And so I suspect half of what the Canadian team did there yesterday was to figure out what's actually on President Trump's mind himself, not what his secretaries are saying, what they think is happening, and to create kind of a framework to look at what this is going forward, whether that is a renegotiated USMCA or whatever else there is going to be. But I think most importantly is there's direct and cordial relationship between the president and our prime minister, and that will lead to probably fewer surprises and ultimately, I think, a better outcome for Canada.
Sharon, what do you think happens next?
Well, I think for starters, yesterday we all took a massive collective sigh of relief. I think we were all sitting in bated breath at the end of our seats trying to figure out where this was going. And I think where this goes next is an actual dialogue. Now, people view diplomacy as one or the other. And I think that with someone like President Donald Trump, diplomacy requires a bit of adaptation to someone's ego. And I think that the way that Prime Minister Carney walked in there, told him he was transformative, complimented him, and tried to feed into the root things that Donald Trump is actually trying to do, you could see in the body language, you could see in the facial expressions that he respected and appreciated that. So I would say where this takes us is a positive path forward. And I think every reasonable Canadian who was rooting for the country yesterday was cheering Prime Minister Carney on, because I think the best case scenario occurred yesterday, and we weren't threatened with like 200% tariffs today. So I think it was a good thing.
Yeah. What a relief. As everyone collectively, Hannah, has kind of described, right? We just don't know. We can't predict what Donald Trump does. We don't know exactly how he's going to move forward with all of this, which reinforces what we've heard from a lot of people who are leading this file, both at the federal and provincial level. Like, we've got to look inward. We've got to figure out how to get our own house in order to not be in such a vulnerable position. And on that, the issues between some of the premiers and between, for example, Alberta's premier, who we just had on, and the prime minister, they're all saying okay things right now. They have that meeting coming up in Saskatchewan. How big of a deal, though, do you think those frictions will be moving forward? Like, do you think essentially Carney is going to move, the prime minister is going to move on energy in a way that he telegraphed during the campaign?
I think he's going to have to. One of the things, and in his communication style too, it's very careful. He's a former banker, and you can't speculate in answers. He did it with the president yesterday, and I think he's been doing it with the premiers. So there's that respectful, very concise answers to what he has to say. We sit here and we go, I think a lot. I don't think I've ever heard him say I think. So, you know, it's more, you have to be specific, because as a governor of the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of England, you have to make sure that what you say doesn't move markets. So he has to be very precise in what he says. I think he's telegraphing exactly what he plans to do with the premiers and with people like Danielle Smith. And that seems to work right now. So yes, he is going to have to make moves, because we do have to figure out how we are going to make this energy transition, not just for oil and gas, but for mining, for other big industries in Canada. If not, then our economy is not going to grow. So he knows that. It's just how he does that and how you move the bureaucracy behind it, too.
Do you think that's the case, Carl? Because he has other constituencies of voters who are concerned about things like climate change, for example, and not necessarily behind, being more aggressive when it comes to developing the capacity to export more energy.
For sure, and that's a delicate balance. And when you start making decisions, that balance may shift.
Right.
But for now, he can do a lot of things without being afraid of losing support. But the problem is that it's not just up to him, and it's not just up to him and Premier Smith or Premier Ford. Because if you're going to try to get some of these products to market, you have to have the agreement of other premiers who don't agree and will not agree. So that's the challenge. How do you get some kind of
communities?
Absolutely, yeah. You're right to point that out. And so how do you get the consensus to get these projects built, to get those pipelines built, to get the grid to be transformed, if you don't have buy-in from all the premiers, or at least the premiers that are going to be impacted, or their profits going to be impacted directly. That's the challenge for Mark Carney, because it's not a bilateral relationship, it's a multilateral.
But there's momentum with Canadians right now, too.
Well, polling shows there's a higher level of support than before, but that doesn't change the process that's in place necessarily to approve or not approve. Jamie, I wanted to get your take on that as well. And if, let's say, you know, for the sake of the argument, there is movement on that front, and the Prime Minister does demarcate himself from the previous one, do you think that actually shifts anything, for example, for Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, or do you think she keeps the flirtation with separatism?
I would hope it makes a shift. I think when you look at the realities of, I think, where the previous Trudeau government was and where Prime Minister Carney is at least nodding favorably, is being open to doing more things and putting the economy at the center, the kind of truly radical position of leaving all carbon-based energy in the ground in pursuit of a very pure climate policy that is doing very little, if nothing at all, to actually lower emissions is effectively looks like it's lost the argument in Canada, especially when you look at the potential for prosperity, when you look at the impact it could have on our economy to pay for all the other services. And so I think perhaps there's almost like a Nixon goes to China aspect for Prime Minister Carney here, where he could talk about how LNG is going to displace coal use in other parts of the world. Here's how we can use our energy and resources sector to create prosperity today and accelerate the transition to realizing net zero's potential. And I think he's probably the best situated to use also market forces to make that argument, whether or not he'll have the political capital with especially the Quebec caucus, which is disproportionately influential in little spheres, and can make the case to Canadians who, frankly, were afraid of a Poilievre government and went en masse to put him in the Prime Minister's chair, remains to be seen. But I think that potential is there. And if he is going to truly, in the long term, I think, succeed as Prime Minister, it's something he's going to have to get right and succeed at. Otherwise, I think he'll potentially be going down the Kathleen Wynne route of being a one-term Prime Minister.
Jamie highlights something that is kind of not being discussed too much yet, Sharon, which is the significance of the Quebec caucus, like the significance of Quebec, period, to the Prime Minister's win. And in this scenario, like, do you envision that being something he does spend political capital on?
Oh, listen, I think he 100% has to. It is the energy sector, I feel like, is one of the most misunderstood sectors out there, specifically when it comes to social license and how politicians have played it. And we saw that. I worked in the private sector for the company that was trying to build Energy East, and I could tell you the amount of bruises I have trying to deal with politicians in Quebec, trying to get it built through there. But we did hear recently from Premier Legault, who said that there was a shift in appetite towards pipelines through Quebec. And I think that we, as a country, and Prime Minister Carney as the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party as a government, has to have these difficult discussions with Quebec and the Quebec politicians, because on one side we have this like semi-NIMBYism of we don't want it in our backyard, but then we also have Alberta, who is threatening potentially to become its own sovereign nation. And we've got to find a common balance there. So I think Quebec plays a very pivotal role in potentially shifting that social license. And I don't think it's just the people. I think it's the politicians who have to better not pander to these certain environmental aspects and groups, but also look at, we use petroleum products in everyday aspects of our life. So I think someone like Carney is going to have to take that into consideration, because otherwise we're going to go through this constant, we want to leave Canada and we don't want a pipeline discussion.